With the summer season upon us in the Northern Hemisphere at least, sorry Australia, let's go through the new features in Betaflight 4.6 and see if they can be any benefit to you in your cinematic or racing season. Yes, Betaflight 4.6 is still in development and not in stable release yet, but just like other releases of Betaflight, if you happen to fly the pre-release, you'd probably be pretty happy with its performance and how well it's pretty stable, even though it's not in stable release yet. They have a pretty good QA process in the Betaflight project. So anyways, let's check out the new features, maybe just be interested in seeing what's coming. And I think there's some new features in here that you'd be interested in if you're a racer or in a cinematic flying that you might find pretty helpful and worth, loading up Betaflight 4.6 and giving it a test fly. So let's check out these new features. First off, some of the biggest new features is all the improvements in GPS position hold and altitude hold and landing, auto landing essentially. And I did a number of videos on there. You can see it here. The online configurator is a new thing with Betaflight 4.6, and that's what you can use. You can actually use that with Betaflight 4.5 as well and older releases. Altitude hold, a lot of position hold improvements, a lot of magnetometer support, and flying now with even out a magnetometer in position hold, just like you can with iNav. You don't need a magnetometer anymore for position, altitude hold, and things of that nature, and return to home. So if you're interested in checking out any of that stuff, I will drop a link down below to this playlist on Betaflight 4.6, and you can see the videos I have here on those features and showing them how they work and how to set them up. Setup's pretty easy, just flash the firmware, but little tips for little things along the way. But the other thing we can do is now go into the GitHub repository and check out some of the pull requests for some of the things that have been merged into the base code of Betaflight. So they're in 4.6 if you would happen to flash that. And you can see here we have a number of tags. And we're going to first check out the major improvements. So the first up here is an interesting one. This is a chirp signal generator. Essentially, it does a mode where you can put on a switch where it would actually oscillate the quadcopter. And I'll show you here in a second what it does. And it's presumably used for tuning. So you have some bunch of variables here you can set up for the hertz frequency for what it's going to go from, like 30 hertz to 100 hertz. And we'll see that here in a second. And then you can log that and kind of use it for tuning. So it's doing the stepped inputs. We'll see. Let me show you what it's going to look like here. So this is a little sample of it right here. And see where he gets this to the right spot. So right here it starts. So the chirp signal's started right there. You can see it oscillates back and forth, and then it's getting tighter, 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 and you can see that. And you can see that that thing. So you'd presumably look at that stepped input in the log, or ultimately maybe there's an auto tuning piece that goes into this that automatically can adjust the gains. From PID control kind of stuff, I would be more looking for like it just deduce sharp twitches like this while you're still in control. So you can click a mode and it would just do these sharp twitches on the roll and pitch axis full rate, and that it would set it based on that. And it doesn't have to do altitude hold. You can just have control of the quadcopter to override it. But if you let go of the sticks, it would start to do these moves. Obviously, you'd be up in the air to do that, and then it can do its auto-tune procedure on it. So, interesting little thing. We'll see where it goes from here, but that's one of the new merge features in Betaflight. Now, this one here has to do with wings. So it comes up with an S term that is in the PID controller when you load up the wing options to use Betaflight with a wing, and I'll be checking that out in the future. This is somewhat similar to iNav. This is what feed forward does in iNav. So in iNav, there's feed forward for quadcopters, but it's a very different thing when it's loaded on wings. When it's loaded on wings, it has to deal with how far your throws are for your control surfaces on a wing. When in iNav, you're using feed forward for a quadcopter, then it has to do with the term that kind of shows the PID the amplitude of how quick you're moving your sticks. So they're two very different things. Where in Betaflight, feed forward is just feed forward all the time. It's the amplitude of how quick you're moving your sticks. But then there's now this S term that has to deal with how far your throws are on your control surfaces. So again, it's only used when you're using select the wing option. When you're going to build in the auto builder, there's a wing option in the builder. But that S term is another term there that would be tuned just like anything else that deals with your throw surfaces, again, for wings. Here we already showed in other videos about altitude hold, a lot of stuff in Betaflight 4.6 for position hold, altitude, return to home, GPS, auto landing, all that kind of stuff. Again, check out that link down below if you're interested in that. Again, more features for wings, a TPA based on airspeed estimation instead of TPA delay. So this is a really good one. I noticed this with wings as well in iNav, that when a lot of times you have a GPS unit, and when you increase your airspeed, your 3D speed, if your PIDs are too high, the wing will start to oscillate. But you could really use those high PID gains when you're just flying around to help with stability of the wing for offsetting gusts. So it's this catch-22, and it really has nothing to do with throttle, because if you're way up in the air and you pitch down, you're going to accelerate, and you could have the throttle set to 0. So it's not based on throttle, it's really based on airspeed. So this is a TPA, if I'm reading this correctly, a TPA based on airspeed. I'm presuming it measures 3D airspeed with a GPS unit or some other method. If it's not using a GPS unit, that would be a good option if it's not in here yet. But, and it would presumably, I haven't tested this yet, reduce your PIDs as your airspeed increases. So again, only an option when you're using wing, which is an option in the build, but again, some enhancements that are coming with wings in Betaflight. Some run-of-the-mill stuff, driver support for the CADX G3 gimbal. It's probably pretty self-explanatory. Position hold and altitude hold updates. We kind of talked about that already. Here's another one for wings that deals with the S-term and how far your throws go based off your airspeed estimation. Again, more improvements for wings. Makes a lot of sense. I know Ivan has really been interested in the wings lately. I think he got a little wing niche in him, and he loves Betaflight, so he just stuck with Betaflight and increased the enhancements in Betaflight for wings. It could use wings before, but it was very difficult. Now he's kind of taken it. I would almost say, like, if you're looking for performance for wings, like high performance, high speed, winged aircraft, you should seriously be checking out Betaflight. If it's just, you know, flying GPS, like more like GPS related enhancements and capability, then iNav, it would be your best bet for wings. Well, iNav flies, wings great. Betaflight doesn't have things like auto launch like iNav does. I really wish Betaflight, you know, it'd be great if that would get added to Betaflight, because I rely on that a lot. It's really nice to be able to just throw it and then it takes off all by itself. Not have to worry about that. But when it's in the air, definitely there's a ton of features I've been working on for wings, specifically for like high performance flying wings, high speed, and how to deal with PIDs in relation to when your airspeed increases, and how to make adjustments so you can kind of have best of the both worlds. Okay, so that rounds out what is tagged as a major feature improvement. Let's check out some of the other tags. So checking out what's tagged as minor features, we got a lot more things here. We actually got 2 pages, and the first one here is collision detection. Not a lot written up on this by Karate Brat. I think this is more like crash detection, as in the air, maybe collision detection. And I'm not exactly sure what it does. I'll have to look into this a little bit more, because there's not a lot of write-up. But I'm presuming it will help your quad not freak out if you get a midair, maybe stabilize it. It has to do with the collision detection algorithm. There is already a collision detection in Betaflight. Maybe it's just optimizing that a little bit further. More to come on that. This one here is some LED functionality, has to do with LEDs, and it can be based on how many LEDs you got lit for satellites, your battery bar, or altitude. So just a quality of life thing if you're interested in some more LED functionality. So this one is just adding MSP support. So MSP support really has to deal with communicating with the computer when you plug it in. Your configurator uses MSP as the protocol to coordinate with or communicate with the flight controller when it's setting up settings. So it has to do with a motor disarm after a few seconds. It has to do with this first calibration on first arm. So if you use that or had, it's going to increase the ability to adjust that setting, either just directly through the configurator now, or other things are starting to use MSP to control settings. So that will add to it. Likewise here, adding RSSI DBM alert to MSP. So again, letting it be configurable. ExpressLRS recommends RSSI DBM for a setting for measurement of filter or of signal quality, and this allows you to configure it in the OSD or in the configurator, so on and so forth. So that is there. If you ever want to dim your LEDs, you know, with a knob or switch on your transmitter, now that is in-flight adjustments or the adjustments variable. So now you can put those on a switch and maybe turn your LED brightness up or down if you're doing a lot of indoor flying, outdoor, and you just want to quickly be able to do that. Now it's an option. So this is another tool, again, for wings. Piecewise linear interpolation routine for wings. It has to do with TPA curves, and I think it's just measurement of those TPA curves and how it's looking at those. Again, a wing thing, and we'll get into this into the future, but some more enhancements there. So if you're working on the design aspect and you're running tasks, and a task has to do with what the flight controls process, so there's debug mode here to see some of the variables to make sure tasks are running on time. Again, more work on TPA for wings and or the PID gains based on throttle percentage in this case. So another option there for that. This is a nice one here. This allows, you know, how we can connect the flight controller to your computer and hit MSP or MSC mode, and then it puts it so you can see the storage on it, and then pull your flash off. Well, that's great, but what if you're in the field? You'd have to like connect with your phone, click the button, then it flips over. Fine. This is another thing where you can just in your OSD click it into storage mode, and then when you plug in your phone or flight computer or whatever, it will automatically be in storage mode. So it allows you to do it from the OSD. What I really think we should add for this, and we'll look at it at one point, is to put it on a switch. So if you're plugged in and have your receiver connected, you could flip your switch down and that will put the flight controller in storage mode. So that's an in-flight adjustment. This is pretty much there. It just has to be brought into the in-flight adjustments. I could probably do that at this point, but nevertheless, little quality of life thing if you need that kind of stuff. So this looks like some enhancements so that we don't have to always reboot the flight controllers from the CLI. Don't exactly understand what it's talking about here. Sets any serial port to MSP, and when you activate in the CLI, it uses that number. You can now exit and save without the reboot. So we'll see where that goes. It might, you know, that would be nice little quality of life improvement that don't have to have a reboot all the time from the CLI, but it looks like some enhancement there. This next one, I think, is where we really start to get into the racing one, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning. So this is a turtle mode update that it will prevent it from like flipping over more. So you can put it in turtle mode, hit the flip, it will detect when it's kind of flipping over and then arrest it. That's the gist in my read of what's going on here. Again, I haven't tested it yet, but that can be awful handy because if you've ever turtle mode, sometimes you turtle mode too far and then you flip back over again. So it'd be nice to just hit it, push it over. It kind of detects when it's flipping, arrests itself because it can, you know, read things a lot faster than we can and be good, especially in race conditions because you're like, you know, frazzled and freaking out, trying to get flipped back over and up in the air. So that can be a big deal. If this really helps and you have that scenario, that could be the difference between winning or losing a race potentially. So that could be a pretty big improvement for folks. Again, some more TPA stuff for wings. Specifically, it looks like dealing with yaw, and rudder kind of pieces to the pie here. So a lot of stuff going in the wings. A little video here if you're interested in checking out what that is. Yeah, check it out there. Some more work here and adding CLA command pass-throughs for MSP support. So again, trying to do stuff in the CLI or with the CLI, but not inducing full reboots and things of that nature. That's at least my gist on this. This is a little bit more computer science than I'm privy with, but that's my read on what's going on there. So a little bit of quality improvement over time there. We'll see with that. Next one up here, logging servos and Blackbox. That would be good, especially with all the stuff we're doing with wings. So this is a nice one if you use Prearm on a switch and you happen to disarm in the air or something of that nature. This will allow the rearming midair, still requiring the prearm, but won't need you to cycle the prearm switch. So right now, if you have the prearm switch up and you disarm in the air, it would be disarmed. So you have to take the prearm down, take the prearm back up, then you can arm again. Here, it would just, if the prearm's up, you're still good. So yeah, a little bit of an improvement there if you use that prearm. Personally, in that case, I'm a big fan of just doing it right in the radio. That way it works for everything for me. It works for all my wings, everything I use this radio for. And I have it so that I just have to have my momentary switch up And then if I have that up and then click up, then it will arm. But that momentary switch, like if I go up and then down, or if I go up, with this and then click it, like there's a time piece in between there. And of course the throttle has to be down too. So I'm a big fan of just doing it in the radio, but take that for what it's worth. I believe I saw this somewhere else, but there's adjustments being made in the configurator so you can more closely fine tune your throttle curve for where your hover point is. So we kind of have that in Betaflight, but I think you can adjust it up and down now here. So it's not only this, how this curve looks here, and where that is, but you can also go up and down, I believe, as well. So some adjustments on fine tuning on throttle curve. I don't use a throttle curve, but I think many people do, and some enhancements there. This is another one. This is a launch timer. So it adds a timer that if you use launch mode, a timer would start on, as soon as you, the quadcopter leaves launch mode here. So that, again, that's for racing. That can maybe help you kind of understand where you're at in, after you kind of launched off the block, and you can peek at that timer, as you're zipping around. So quality of life for racers right there. So that pretty much rounds out what we have for minor improvements. So we did major improvements, minor improvements. Now we're doing just improvements, or major features, minor features. Now we're just doing improvements. And improvements here we have quite a bit. So it's 4 pages. I'm going to probably skip some of these, go through see what I see is interesting, and go from there. First one here, as you can see, we have something that adds the FLRCF modes from the ELRS to SPI implementation. So if you have an SPI receiver and for Express LRS, again, now you have the FLRCF modes added into there. So it's I guess I would say quality of life. Here's a neat little one. If you're into logos, it looks like it just works so far, and maybe there's more PRs that expand this, but it was just for Walksnail, I think, so far, that you could have logos displayed here based on logos. It looks like logos that you'd have on your SD card on your goggles, and then depending on what the settings on here, it would display whichever logo you wanted for startup. So, and it depends, if you're a racing team kind of a thing and you have different sponsors and that kind of thing comes into play, then that might be nice. I don't know that you'd be using Walksnail in that scenario, but nevertheless. So here's one CTZ Snooze working on refactoring the RX code and better support 25 hertz links. So if you're a long range pilot using those low or high latency links for longer range, then this will do a little bit better job of interpolating the frequency in those bigger steps for your long range flying. If you're using Crossfire, adding the missing Varo sensor to the Crossfire protocol. So that's again, if you're using Crossfire. And more feed forward improvements in Betaflight 4.6. So looks like here have a increased or added a faster rising and slower decay from the set point. So that could probably be a big deal. Feed forward, that's kind of the differentiator between iNav and Betaflight. I mean, iNav flies really well, but feed forward is not nearly as sophisticated as Betaflight's feed forward. This is even taking it even further to the next step, and having a very sophisticated feed forward algorithm really is the key to tracking and reducing latency from your stick inputs for a racing scenario. If you have really good feed forward and you have that tuned well, your quad can really be right on top of your set point, and that is, like the only delay then you have is from your finger through the radio to the quad. But there's not going to be any delay in the quad's movement based on your finger inputs. So that's a pretty big deal when we're talking about this connected feel and low latency and all that kind of high performance racing stuff. So yeah, another racing improvement here, feed forward. Chris Thompson always does really good work. His OCD kicks in and he really sticks on something. So I'm sure I have to check this out, but I'm sure look at all the write-up he does. He really gets thorough on stuff, as you can see. But yeah, check that out. Again, feed forward improvements for racing. Again, some more TPA stuff for wings. So just keeping focus and keep working on that TPA delay in milliseconds for wings. So just again, continuously, Ivan's really working on trying to adjust those PIDs on wings based on the different scenarios to really optimize your tune for wings. This is just a change that it changes the launch mode control default to pitch only. So instead, I guess maybe it did roll too in the past. So now it's really just going to adjust on your pitch, at least for the default. TPA gravity factor for wings, more work on TPA. Adding Crossfire Varo altitude sensor support. So that's another one if you're using Crossfire. Cinematic pilots use a lot of Crossfire yet for that control link. So again, some improvements here and also up here for those folks using Crossfire. And we wouldn't be remiss without some more definition and wing for advanced TPA in servos for wings. Again, I've been working on that stuff. And that's just page 3. Let's go to page 2. Here we have GPS home altitude is added to your Blackbox log. So if you were interested in capturing that or seeing that, and nowadays you can even take those Blackbox logs and put them in and actually have the traced flight. You can export that to a KMZ file. I think you can for Betaflight. I know you can for iNav. One's adding support, MSP support for rangefinders. So rangefinder module is added from iNav to Betaflight. Thank you, iNav. And tested the LiDAR sensor for the MTF-01P module. So this would have to do with a better control of your altitude in an indoor environment or when you're close to the ground. So it adds more sensors essentially. You have your GPS unit if you're outside. You have your Varo if you're either way, outside or inside. But then you have that rangefinder, which really increases the precision when you're close to the ground. The key is these rangefinders need to have some actual range to them. A lot of these rangefinders, it's like 2 meters, and then they're out of range. You need one at least 8 meters, in my opinion, because 2 meters is not that high. 8 meters now, we're talking that once you're above the 8-meter range, you're up at a height that your relative position of the ground, you don't notice the altitude changes so much. 2 meters, 6 feet, it's not that high. You'll tell since you're so close to the ground, you'll see that relative difference pretty dramatically. But a rangefinder will help, but you don't want to be at the maximum extent of that rangefinder's capability. You want to have some cushion there. Some more improvements for wings to help for level flight. It's basically a pitch offset. Wings generally have a slight up pitch angle, and it helps, allow you to pump that in there so you're not going up or down. Again, logging the S values for wings, another piece to the puzzle on that logging and kind of increasing that wing support. Another optical flow sensor added. Again, this is coming back to just Betaflight. I don't know, its GPS game a little bit more. So you can see added PR optical flow sensors, support RoboFuse MT, rangefinder, and an optical flow sensor. So yeah, if you're needing better quality ground control or elevation control near the ground, check out these rangefinders, and you can now start to use them with Betaflight. This is another little quality of life. The OSD elements will have different colors. This is basically adding support for different colors so that if you don't have enough satellites, a different color than just the normal. That's my read of what this is saying here. So again, little quality of life stuff. Crossover flap green. It's all good and drawn arrow. Just tracks the eye more. Things of that nature. Just little things in the OSD. So another filter improvement here. This talks about filter initialization and just trying to get a more accurate initializing and reading filters for the where to place the RPM filters, because there's a lot of mechanics that have to deal with loop time. So just some more tweaking around the edges just to increase filter performance. And that, again, back to our cinematic pilots and really on all freestyle racing. That's another big differentiator between Betaflight and iNav. Feed forward's much better in Betaflight, and the filtering is much better in Betaflight, specifically any of the notch filtering. This one looks like it's increasing the number of MSP ports, so I guess this has to do with more and more peripherals using the MSP protocol to connect to the flight controller. I don't know what the limit was before. Maybe it was you can only use 1, 2, or 3. Now it's up to 4. Another rangefinder being added, the TF Nova. I must have skipped over this one. Brian White, PID Toolbox guy, increased the number of notches we can use. And this is based on his experience with Cinelifters, big quads. So if you're in the big quad world, that, the number of dynamic notches at 5, you could use a little bit more, a couple more. Based on his experience, and that really has to do with ones specifically that don't support RPM filtering. So if you're using APD ESCs or other ESCs, which is somewhat typical on fairly large quads, because they're just, that's what's used for better or for worse, because they're made for larger crafts. They have the onboard filtering, electrical filtering, and just a little bit more robust. But those ESCs do not support bidirectional RPM data. So in that case, you can't use the RPM filters. So in that case, you're specifically leaning on the dynamic notch, which is very good. We just talked about how it's improved a little bit more. Now, of course, we would be remiss by talking about that. We were just talking about stuff that's already been merged, but there's things in process yet. So if you go and kind of look at, there's 54 open PRs here. A lot of the stuff's still tagged for Betaflight 4.6, some in draft mode, some open pull requests that are ready to be merged. You can kind of breeze up through these a little bit. So this one here looks like a little bit of analyzation and improvement on altitude sensor fusion between the GPS unit and Varo. That's always welcome, because it's a trick. It's really the Varo that's mostly the issue. When you move side to side or whatnot, that gets influenced and tends to push the quad off course. But maybe some wiser sensor fusion algorithms can help with that. So KarateBrot's checking that out. Some more adjustability here for the filters themselves. So all the notch filters and the bi-quad filters, I think even the PT1, I think it's just hard coded for PT1, has a Q factor. It has to deal with the cutoff and how quickly how the filter works, how kind of abrupt the filter works, and a Q factor. It's the same thing for the notches. You're used to adjusting the Q factor from 300 to 500 on the dynamic notch if you go into those settings. So you can adjust those Q factors too on low pass filters, and that's adding that ability here. We'll see if it gets merged. KarateBrot's working on that one as well. Like Chris Rosser's back at it with the I-term, checking out some I-term rotation based on considerations for aerobatics. Let's see what he's got going on in his one. Only rotates pitch and roll I-term based on yaw input. I think he did a video on this. So this is some code he's working on there. We'll see if that gets introduced. I think it swaps the I-term. So if you have build up on the roll axis and it's, build up to go this way and then you roll this way, it will, obviously that goes then to the pitch. So it would put that onto the pitch axis, obviously, because if the I-term's built up this way and then you go like this, then it's built out that way. I don't know. See if I don't know if that's correct in all conditions, but that's the scenario. It makes some sense if you're, so we'll see where it goes, see if it gets merged in. Some more filtering improvements here, talking about the RPM limiter. So this has to do with the RPM limiter. It's based on a PT1 filter for looking at the RPM data. Again, so this would be, if you're using RPM limiting for racing, some improvements they're looking at here on that. So just looking at these quick, adding linearization of the output for thrust offset for the PID for altitude hold. So we'll see if that can help with increasing altitude hold stability. Adding rangefinder altitude hold estimate using the Kalman filter for sensor fusion. Oh, that Kalman filter. We'll see where that goes. Hopefully it's a true Kalman filter, not these make-believe PT1 filters that we call Kalman filter. Again, more attention to improving altitude control by adding a high-pass filter to the P-term. And here's a big update. Looks like Chris is working on that's going to use ArduPilot's method of controlling the flight, home, and descent. So it's like porting some of the stuff that is used by ArduPilot for the GPS rescue or return to home. Some more improvements here on the altitude limit. So this would basically add a limiting altitude that you'd be able to punch in, and then it won't let you go above that somehow. I don't know. I'd be interested in checking that out. I want to test. I'm going to do a little fun video on this and check that out. Just full throttle it or try to get above that altitude and see what it does. Does it just cut the motors? I guess if you just cut the motors, she'll go down one way or another. So yeah, we'll check that out if you want to just punch in an altitude limit. Could be good if you're trying to teach somebody to fly so they don't go crazy, go way up in the air. Looks like Quick Flash has one up here for trying to get his dynamic stick inputs into here, softer sticks at center point, and it's kind of the emu flight, some of that emu flight stuff. Yeah, see where that goes, see if that's seen to be a benefit. And then last but not least, and just to wrap this up, mine's on the board here for adding the simplified master slider to your in-flight adjustments. I need to finish that up, take that out of draft stamp, but I do plan to add that and all the filter sliders in there. The filter sliders, the gyro and the D-term, but then also adding some more of the PID sliders there as well, so you can do some in-flight adjustments for that kind of stuff. But for now, that should wrap us up. That's probably long enough. Hopefully that gives you a little sense of what's brewing under the hood of Betaflight. Heck, it could be another 6 months before this thing comes out. I don't know, but you can fly it now. A lot of people do. I do. You know, if you have some extra time, you know, go out, check it out, flash it up, be careful and safe, of course. But then what you'll probably find is it's fine. And yeah, you can, you know, start testing it out and using it. Like I said, if that's not your bailiwick, then just wait till the stable release comes out. But this is what is coming in the future. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and put those down below. Thanks, everybody. I hope this helps, and we'll see you on the next one.